It's a tough one because when I wrote this book here, Prophecy, a lot of the people giving financial advice, all they know is a bull market. They were born just prior to 2008. They're now probably, let's say, 25 years old. They're financial planners, real estate brokers. And all they know is the S&P keeps going up. Don't fight the Fed. They're idiots. Unfortunately, without financial education in our schools, you can't blame them, but they don't know what a bear market, and they don't know what inflation looks like, because inflation has made them rich. Because the Fed, what do they say? 40% of all money was printed in the last 2 years or something. I don't know if it's true or not, but the money supply is so huge today because they're trying to prevent the balloon from collapsing. They're doing.
How can Robert explain in his statement that this will be the biggest crash in world history? What is actually happening right now that we might not see reported in the papers every day?
Years ago, I was benefit of studying with a man named Buckminster Fuller. He's considered a futurist, and he invented the geodesic dome. And my poor dad just adored him, because my poor dad was an academic, PhD from Stanford, University of Chicago, Northwestern, University of Hawaii. So academics loved Fuller, and he built the geodesic dome in 1967. I was at school in New York, went from Hawaii to New York, and I hitchhiked to Montreal, Canada, to Expo 67, the World's Fair on the Future, because I like looking into the future. And Fuller's Dome was the U.S. pavilion at Expo 67. And I went through there. I said, man, that guy thinks differently, Buckminster Fuller. So just check him out. And when I was a kid, my poor dad used to have me building the structures of universe. He called them like squares, tetrahedrons. I'm like 10 years ago. What the hell am I studying this stuff for? But it affected my brain because I was working with my hands. I was doing math with little sticks and glue and things like this. And I learned more by doing, not by reading books. When I'm doing something, I learn more. So in 60s, after building the dome building little tetrahedrons as a kid, it stuck in my brain. In 1967, I'm in school, the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, one of the 5 federal schools in America, military school. And I hitchhiked from New York to Montreal, and I went through the geodesic dome. It blew me away. I went, holy. So that's how it all got started. Fuller was a futurist. John Denver wrote a song about him, calling him the grandfather of the future. And for 3 years, 81, 82, and 83, I studied during the summer to how to see the future. And in next year sometime, I'm coming out with a book called The Raven. And the raven in Greek mythology was the god of prophecy. And so here's this book here, Rich Dad's Prophecy, just to prove I back up what I say. I can prove I said this stuff. I said the biggest stock market crash is still coming. And this was after the 2008 crash. And the reason I could predict that the 2008 crash was just a prelude for the bigger crash coming, which we are in today in 2022. I mean, even China's crashing today, because they never fixed the problem. In fact, the whole problem is the global economic system is rigged. It's called the central bank system. The Bank of Japan, the Bank of England, Bank of Japan, and stuff like this. This whole system is rigged. Fuller passed away in 1980. In 84, his book came out called The Grunch of Giants. And so he was already dead. And I'm reading Grunch of Giants, and Grunch stands for gross universal cash heist. It's how our wealth is stolen via our money. And that fit my whole internal belief system. You know, if you don't believe it, you think he's a whack job. But in 1984, I said, man, this guy is onto it. Fuller is onto it. I read Grunch of Giants, and that's how I can write books like Prophecy. I'm not just blowing smoke today, is go get the book. And what happened, 2008 crash, and then it set up the biggest bull market in history. But it was based upon fake money. They just kept printing more, using more debt, because money is debt. If we don't borrow money, money doesn't exist. So money comes into existence because every time you use a credit card, take out a mortgage, buy a car, that's when money is created. That goes back to 1913. Again, the Federal Reserve Bank was created, central banks, which is Marxism. And then in 1913, in America, the Internal Revenue Service was created, the IRS, because money cannot exist without debt and taxes. And so that's why I wrote this book here. You can say, well, Kiyosaki is full of shit. He's bullshitting. Read the fucking book. That's what I'm saying. I practice what I preach, and I do what I say I'm doing. So that's how I could write prophecy.
Did Robert feel like the world started realizing what's happening with the advent of cryptocurrencies?
2021, China collapsed. And that's why COVID appeared again. Notice that? So Evergrande, which is the bigger than Lehman Brothers crash. And Evergrande's going down. Now, when real estate goes down, it's a financial crash more than anything else. They have 90 million condos in China not occupied. It's going down the toilet right now. When real estate goes down, it takes all the economies of the world with it. Like Australia, one of my favorite countries, ships a lot of supplies to China. And there, Australia was booming because China was booming with real estate. And so in 2021, when it collapsed, that means Australia collapses more. But that's why I think Australia locked the country down also. Everybody to stay indoors. I personally think they're afraid of civil unrest. And that's COVID appeared in September 17, 2019, our repo market collapsed. And the repo market is the shadow banking system, as they call it. You don't see that market, but I'm watching the shadow banking system. And when the repo market collapsed in September 17, 2019, voila.
What can Robert advise people to do about inflation and even the upcoming crash?
Well, I think why is there inflation is they're trying to prevent the collapse. Jim Rickards, he's one of the smartest guys. He says, prepare, we're going to collapse. And people just 98% don't understand this. The dollar is a reserve currency of the world, which came about in 1944 with the Bretton Woods Agreement. We can just keep printing money, but the rest of the world's collapsing right now. And everybody depends upon the US printing. But that's why I watch China. And when Evergrande came down in 2021, the biggest real estate collapse in history, bigger than 2008. And all of a sudden, they locked people down with COVID. I've seen this story before because it happened in 2019. They're desperate, right? They're looking for anything that can stop this thing. But when every time they said to me, don't fight the Fed, I'm saying, don't trust the Fed was my stay. Why would I trust those SOBs? They're a central bank system. The Rothschilds and all those guys controlled them. The richest families in the world control the central banks. And you pull the curtain aside. It's like the story of the Wizard of Oz. There's a little guy back there called the Fed chairman trying to keep the economy from collapsing on them. But they're going to keep printing and printing and printing until the thing is destroyed. That's my prediction.
Does Robert think that printing money by the Fed is the beginning of the end of the system?
There's people much smarter than me who say that. I've been saying that for years, but I was the whack job or the Chicken Little on the outside, some whack job without a degree in finance. You know what my degree is in?
What?
Oil. So I went to U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York, and this is in 65 to 69, and I studied oil. Capitalism is a religion, and Marxism is a religion. So is fascism. When you can get it from that perspective, you have more options to choose which one you like. But the biggest problem today, again, is we have no financial education in our schools. But this is what's worse. I'm in New York City, 65 to 69, studying oil. I drove tankers for Standard Oil. I invest in oil wells today. I don't investigate in oil stocks. I want the real stuff. The Fed cannot print oil, Brian.
Not yet.
But what happened, my digressing. So when Biden took the Keystone Pipeline XL, whatever it is, off the list, oil went from $30 a barrel to $130 a barrel in a few days. So in other words, inflation went through the roof. It wiped out the middle class and the poor. But a guy like me who invests in oil wells, not oil stocks, I made so much money because when the price of oil went up to 130 today, I think it's 105. I'm creaming it right now. Unfortunately, it's killing the poor and middle class because they can't put gas in the car, they can't buy groceries, and then they can't afford to shop. I see all the clothes on sale everywhere and all this. And that's what's predicted in here. That's how I see the world from very economic point of view, but real economics. A lot of the really smart guys on Wall Street, too, they don't understand what I'm saying. They're inside the machine.
Yeah.
They're inside the whole grinder out there.
How does Robert manage to inculcate to people when he says, poor people work for money, rich people make money work for them?
And and this was book number 2. If I could show it to you, it's this cash flow quadrant.
Oh, yeah.
And the 4 people in capital or money all throughout the world. You have employees, small business, self-employed. You have big business, 500 employees or more. And you have I. It stands for insider. It doesn't stand for investor. So I always invest from the inside. And people say, well, isn't insider trading illegal? Yeah, for these guys. It's legal for these guys. The other thing is taxes, like Ocasio-Cortez, she's a communist from New York. She says tax the rich. Well, the only people that pay taxes are employees. They pay 40%. This is global. It's pretty much set by the central banks like the Rothschilds. And then S, the small business, the small entrepreneur, they pay 60% taxes. So the small entrepreneur is crushed all from the start. But big business is 500 employees or more, defined by the Internal Revenue Service, the tax department, is 20%, and insiders pay 0. So when I was about 18 years old, my rich dad pulls me aside because this is my poor dad here. Go to school, get a job. My mom wanted to become a doctor, and they have to be, S stands for smart. She said, you're right, don't be a doctor. And B stands for big business entrepreneur. This is Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and all those guys. And I as an insider. So I just took I think you'll appreciate this here. This is my first listing on the New York Stock Exchange, July 8th, 2022. But I said, okay, the goal of a real entrepreneur, this guy here, is take your company public and get listed. So that's who you guys watch, right? When you were in Wall Street, you were watching these guys move around. Yeah, and let me say again, because I studied oil at the Academy in New York, military school, when Biden took the pipeline off the line, I got richer. Oil went from $30 a barrel to $130. But unfortunately, it destroyed the middle class. And I think that's what's going on and why I think this book is more important today than ever before. It's not a mistake.
How Robert describes the retirement crisis and why people have to be worried about it.
Buckminster Fuller said, argue with the artifact. So don't listen to what I'm saying right here. This is the book I wrote. It's called Who Stole My Pension? And it's written by myself and a guy named Ted Siddell. So if you're like 50 years old right now and you have a government pension, or whatever, RRSP in Canada, or a super in Australia, I would get this book here. Because the purpose of money was, as Fuller said in his book, Grudge of Giants, the purpose of the financial system was to steal your wealth. And that's a pretty radical statement. And I said I was a very confused young man, having a rich dad and a poor dad, and then studying with Fuller, who my poor dad loved, and my rich dad had no idea who he was. So I had to listen to 2 different points of view. Again, economics is basically a religion. And the question is, which religion do you want to follow? Tax the rich or don't pay taxes? Put your money in an IRA or don't put any money in the stock market. So I own no stocks except the companies I took public. I'm a capitalist. I invest from this side and this side. These guys cannot go public. You know that, I know that. The companies are too small.
How does Robert teach people to become insiders?
Well, there's many ways. It's the moment you go into, I love real estate because the moment you go into real estate, I'm using debt. And the moment I use debt, I pay no taxes. And all the other financial planners who advise these guys here, the 401k, RRSP, superannuations, they tell you get out of debt. On this side here, I'm using debt. It's called OPM. And so the moment I go into real estate, I'm an insider. So I actually control, I don't care if it's a little 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom house or whatever it is, I'm now in control of the deal. I'm the manager. But when you give your money to a mutual fund, then you're hiring a manager. And supposedly an ETF it's automatically managed for you. But to do what this site does, when I was about 18, I had to make up my mind, which one was I going to be? Then my education changed. It always changed. And so I do have a college degree. It's a Bachelor of Science in and it made me a rich man. But you have to choose your degree. But I also, what made me rich is I also have my rich dad's information is I invest in the oil well, not the oil stock. And I'll say it again, the Fed cannot print oil.